Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hayzlett, and this is All Business. We are so dependent on electricity in our lives today and take for granted that it will always be readily available. Now, according to my guest today, our power grid is in danger. The threats that exist are real, and it's not a matter of if, but when. David Tice is the producer and director of the documentary Grid Down, Power Up, who is here today not to just talk about the threats, but solutions that can help solve and even protect us from these impending threats. David, welcome to All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett.
So glad to be with you and your viewers, Jeffrey.
Well, it's good to have you. I wonder if you could tell me why. Now, you're from finance. Why would you get involved in the motion picture industry?
So I've always recognized the value of film and the reach in order to reach, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people. And I was also involved in a film, Soul Surfer, about 12 years ago, where we talked about Bethany Hamilton, who lost an arm to a shark, an amazingly inspirational story. So I've recognized the value of film. But I set up a company, Paul Revere Films, because frankly, I'm trying to warn people. I feel like there's this vulnerability out there that can be fixed.
So what drew you to the topic?
So I've been a geopolitical student for more than a couple decades. I guess I'm more of a Boy Scout in that I worry about what the future might be and therefore feeling about being prepared. And I'm worried about some of our adversaries, Russia and China. And there's a lot of people that poo-pooed that threat after the Cold War ended, and I always felt like the danger was always there.
So it seems almost like an impending kind of nuclear threat, except this is about taking the grid down. Why has there not been an attack already today?
Well, our adversaries, will wait. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it might not be coming. I mean, obviously this would be a massive outcome that could, create World War III like we've never seen before. And therefore, if you're falling from a 100-story building, you might feel like 30 floors down. The view's great. I'm having a great time, but you haven't, hit the bottom yet. So just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it isn't coming.
Well, there's been some natural ones without question. I mean, we've seen Texas go down. And so we saw an Armageddon that occurred in Texas. I think they even called it Texas. Again, I can't even pronounce the word.
Snowmagedon.
Snowmagedon, that's right. It was Snowmagedon because it was caused by ice and snow in Texas, which is rarely seen, and literally shut the state down. Are we going to see things like that, or is it going to be worse?
So actually, we differentiate in a film what is a short-term outage, like what we saw in Texas, and then what could be longer than 6 months. And so actually, something that happened with Snowmagedon almost, causes more complacency in that 250 people died, and yes, it was hardship, but it wasn't nationwide, and we're not talking about what we're talking about. If the power grid goes off 6 months, we're talking about 250 million people died.
Let's talk about the grids. How many grids are there in the United States?
So there's 3 grid systems. There's the Eastern grid, the Western grid, and the Texas grid.
So Texas is standing alone, all by itself once again.
Yes.
So I've seen the film. I've seen it numerous times because we've been partnering with you on the C-Suite Network and bringing this film to light. And of course, this topic with the council and everything else that we're doing, we'll talk a little bit about that.
Right.
But when I was watching the motion picture, one of the biggest things that came out to me was when we say 6 months, I think, come on, David, 6 months. Is it really going to happen? But yet, these large transformers that have to be made, if someone takes one of those out, it's 18 months before you get the next one.
Exactly. So these transformers are essentially the, center point for the power grid. And these weigh several hundred tons each, and they're made abroad, and we don't have any backups, and therefore it could take up to 18 months, as you said, to replace these. So if you end up losing a series of transformers, then we truly are in huge trouble.
We talked a little bit about these are made out of the country. Where are they being made?
Okay, most of them are made in South Korea and Germany. However, a number of them are now being made in China.
So when we look at potential threats to our national security, it could be made by not only a power like China, but they're also making the component parts that are going into our major, infrastructure?
Yes, there are numerous electronics that are even coming into the transformers made in South Korea and Germany that are coming from China.
So I got to ask the question, being a former Senate staffer, a House staffer, being a C-suite executive, it seems to me we'd be putting precautions into place. Why aren't these precautions being put into place?
It's really ridiculous, the vulnerability, because frankly, the utility industry has not been well enough regulated. And so frankly, what's happened is a concept called regulatory capture, where the industry is so in bed with the regulators that they essentially get what they want. And therefore, the regulators don't have enough teeth and are not standing up for the American people.
But even the folks that are producing electricity, they don't want to see this happen. So why aren't they doing more to put more safeguards into place?
Well, it's an extraordinarily complex issue because of rate making. You end up having to put these capital expenditures into the rate base. There's so much pressure on these utilities to keep rates down, and therefore they really feel like something isn't likely to happen. And frankly, they don't want to spend the money when they're not sure if they're going to get paid back. They feel like if something happens, it's not going to be on their watch, and it is just something to be able to be pushed off into the future.
That's like putting your head into a hole in the ground and just waiting for it to go by. Because if I remember from the film, and I don't know the exact number, you might remember this as the producer of the motion picture, is that there have already been attacks on the grid. Now they're minor attacks, nothing that's taken anything out, but I do believe we were like 1 minute away or 4 minutes away from the grid going down at one point. But lots of individual attacks that many would say are terrorist attacks. So someone shooting at transformers, shooting out transformers, storming facilities, and attacks like that, right?
So it's been reported between 2010 and 2020, there were 700 reported attacks on substations.
That's not wishing the problem will go away. That means the problem is here.
And in fact, a 60 Minutes story came out February earlier this year talking about as few as 9 substations. If they were in critical nodes, if those all went down at the same time, it could knock out the power coast to coast.
How confident are you that something can be done about this problem?
I'm 100% confident. This can be done. Our military has essentially protected their command control centers, their missile systems, etc. This has been a major endeavor and effort for them over the last couple decades.
You think this is something that the military should take a look at and do?
Well, the military can certainly get involved. There has to be collaboration because the military knows a lot about this issue and some of the specific steps, hardware to be implemented. So they should collaborate and be involved.
Okay, this sounds like this is a very expensive endeavor that's going to cost a lot of money. How expensive is it?
So it's not even that expensive. Now, some of the estimates, are as low as $5 to $10 billion to protect against geomagnetic storm, which is essentially a solar storm, or certain elements of electromagnetic pulse. Now, the numbers could get higher for all the wires and the transmission system and some of the distribution system. I'd say it could go up to $50 billion or $100 billion, but those numbers are still so tiny. We have a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill right now.
And it's not just about terrorist attacks, right? It's also about the weather. The weather's caused some issues, and you mentioned solar as well.
Okay, so the film talks about 4 major threat vectors. Number one is physical attack, as we said, could come in from terrorists. The second one is a cyber attack that could come in from a state actor. Thirdly is an electromagnetic pulse attack, which is a nuclear blast in the atmosphere that creates gamma waves.
Things that I remember protecting myself underneath the desk when I was a kid in school.
Right.
Yeah.
Which would wipe out electronics, and therefore, so that is threat number 3. And then the fourth is what's called a geomagnetic disturbance, which is essentially a natural EMP, natural electromagnetic
And that's
pulse.
happened before.
Yes. So there was a massive one in 1859 called the Carrington event. You can read about it on the internet, and it essentially destroyed our telegraph system.
Everything.
Yes.
I mean, it wiped everything out.
Yes. It sent telegraph operators to the hospital. It essentially turned railroad ties into pretzels. I mean, this was massive. And then there have been these massive attacks expected every 150 years. So we are essentially know this is going to come down the road. There were also massive GMD disturbance in 1921 and also in 1989.
So when I'm watching the film, it's scary. It's a little scary, but you give people hope. What message do you want people to take away from the film itself?
So, frankly, we need to be ticked off Americans, and we need to say, damn it, we're not going to take this anymore. And we need to create almost a Tea Party movement, because this is complicated, but it is simple in that we've got to fix this. So we have mechanisms on our website at griddownpowerup.com whereby you can send letters, make phone calls, sign petitions to your 2 U.S. senators, your 2 state legislators, your U.S. congressman, and your governor. You can also send emails and letters to your Public Utility Board of Directors, and then also to some of your regulators, the chairman of your state's utility commission.
We even talk a little bit, you can share it with friends and get other friends involved with it as well, right?
Exactly. So we can't just be on our own and do this. We need to share this. If everyone reached out and sent the link to 10 people, and they sent it to 10 people, and they sent it to 10 people, you know, we can really take this by storm. We can make this happen.
Yeah, so you start with a film. Are you trying to turn this into some kind of movement?
Exactly. So we have converted this movie into a movement. And you talked about C-Suite Network, a great organization that you founded and you chair. We have partnered with C-Suite Network to form a U.S. Energy Security Council. And that website is usenergysecuritycouncil.com.
Or come to csuitenetwork.com and you'll be able to find it there listed under all the councils that we support and be a part of it. And that's aimed at businesses, right?
So what we hope to accomplish here is have businesses be interested in this topic. We have board of directors and lobbyists for these other companies, not the utilities. They ought to be fighting for this as well. We're going to have legislators, their aides, citizen warriors, vendors, C-suite executives can all come to this infrastructure of the Energy Security Council and collaborate and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and learn from each other.
And it's about cooperating, right? I mean, this is not a Republican issue versus Democrat. This is an American issue, and one for business, quite frankly, and survival.
Exactly. And we talk at length in the film how this is a bipartisan issue. Actually, President Obama fought for GMD protection back in 2015, 2016. And unfortunately, because of regulator stagnation, nothing really came out of that.
I want to talk a little bit more about the journey that you got here. Now, again, I mentioned that you've been in finance. I was with you at a convention here recently, and someone said, is that David Tice, the David Tice? I said, yes, that's the one. So tell me about your progression to get here, and what triggered this for you?
So I've been a money manager over a couple decades, and I'm still involved in a couple of those entities, trying to protect investors from what I think is going to be, tumultuous financial future. But as I said earlier, I'm interested in the geopolitical world, and I worry about China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And I found out about a documentary that had been started and not quite finished, and I'm a big believer in low-hanging fruit. And therefore, I might not have had the courage or the initiative to take this on from scratch. But given that it was partially done, I felt like, gee, I've got some skills and some resources and some time and some passion for this. And frankly, God was calling on me, saying that pick this up and move it to
something in the back of your head. But you're not a filmmaker, David.
No.
But you became a filmmaker as part of this. I mean, I know that you were involved in every single cut, and I've seen it like literally 100 times, and you've changed it over a time period. How'd you pick up those skills?
Well, I tell you, there were gift from God to a degree. I also had some smart people working with me behind the scenes. I have a great editor, John Gilbert, who's an Emmy Award-winning editor. Had some great consultants.
And tell us about who narrates this motion picture.
So we have Dennis Quaid to narrate it, and he's been a longtime friend. And he's been a believer in this for over a decade. And he looks right into the camera and says, choose power up, not grid down. So it's really a compelling, so I think it's an entertaining film.
And he really got involved with it, because I remember one of the people tell me that one of the first things he did was asking a bunch of questions, not just reading the script.
Oh, and he ended up composing, a couple lines about how a march in Selma, Alabama led to the Million-Man March that led to 10 million Americans being galvanized to take on racial segregation.
Now, there's a lot of experts in this, from the military to those that are trying to fix the power grid to politicians and just normal patriots that are in this motion picture. Tell me about some of them.
Okay, so we have Newt Gingrich as an example, as mentioned. Ted Koppel, has a significant number of statements.
Yeah, a number of great statements as he narrated through some of the key issues as he's covered this over decades.
Yes, exactly. General Stephen Quast, who has been an amazing patriot, who set up a San Antonio Joint Base Initiative to try to harden our civilian infrastructure in San Antonio. We have Tommy Waller, Frank Gaffney, Mike Mabee. Some of these guys are
great
not
patriots. Some of them military, served in the military. How about Bob?
So Bob Hall is an amazing patriot. He is a state senator for more than a decade. He was actually involved as a young military officer more than 50 years ago. He was put in charge of actually protecting our Minuteman missile system.
Which is a lot like this, hardening the silos, as they used to talk about it. But in this case, we have to harden the grid, right?
Exactly. And so it is a travesty that our military is ready for this, and we actually have General John Hyten, who is now retired, talking about the fact that, yes, we're protecting the military, but our civilian infrastructure, we haven't really looked at that.
So in the movie, there's even some projections that, not made by the movie itself, but made by real experts that say if we have an extended power grid outage for a year, long period, how many people will we lose? Just in the United States, it's millions of people that lose their lives.
Yes, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. We're talking about 90% of American citizens.
Because food doesn't work, hospitals don't work. I mean, we can keep right on down the list of the things that you're going to have. And even in one, there was a dire statement by a general that said those that are going to have food are only have people who have guns. I mean, it will go down to that level.
Yes, it really becomes almost a zombie apocalypse when you think about your neighbors are probably going to turn on neighbors. If they don't have water, they don't have food, and they have a 6-year-old, after 3 days we die, without water. And therefore, if you got a swimming pool, then people are going to be, hopefully there will be helpful cooperation, and I believe in the American, goodness. But then, after a while, I mean, people are going to turn on you, and people from other neighborhoods are going to come in, and it will be terror.
Is this just a U.S. problem, or does this also exist around the world? Have you looked at that?
Well, other countries have been more cognizant of this issue, and we know Russia and China have spent more money and resources protecting their grid. In terms of Europe, a lot of nations are not as electronically advanced as we are, and therefore that puts us at even more risk.
So your efforts going forward, where's going to be the concentration? Is it to focus first on Texas, get a foothold in maybe a smaller grid, and then go to the two larger eastern and western grids, or just everywhere?
So some marketing people have told me this, but I like to follow this guy, Jeffrey Hayzlett, and he says, think big, act bigger.
Yeah.
And frankly, we are excited about this Texas initiative, but because there's legislation coming in 2023 January that Bob Hall is going to fight for, I think it's going to get done. I think that will mobilize the other 49 states to get going, but I want this to be a nationwide issue. I mean, if I were Florida and Michigan, I wouldn't be waiting. I'd be working on this right now.
Well, every state, quite frankly. I mean, one state's not more important than the others, but certainly some states rely on electricity a little bit more than maybe some of the rural states that could cope with it a little bit better. So let's talk a little bit more on how people get information. Where do you want to send them?
Okay, so griddownpowerup.com. It's going to be available on the website. We're going to utilize an innovative approach utilizing Pay It Forward, where you can watch a movie, through the generosity of somebody who's come before you, but then we're asking you to, put, a few shekels into the pot, and we're having 25% of any proceeds that come in go out to 501c3 organizations that fight for grid protection. Also, coming up in probably the next week and a half, it's going to be available at Epoch TV, which is epochtv.com.
So you're getting it out everywhere you can, right?
Yes.
How can people see the movie?
So within 10 days, epochtv.com, you can become a subscriber, or you can have pay-per-view. It's going to be available at $8.99. That's just going to be within 10 days or so. After, they're going to have a 2-week exclusive. After that period ends, it will be available on our website at griddownpowerup.com.
Thank you, David. Well, I appreciate it so much for having you join us. And that's all. We're going to wrap up here. I've been talking with David Tice, a business person, financier, turned movie maker, as he's put out this great movie called Grid Down Power Up, an award-winning motion picture. You want to be able to see it, and come see it and get all the information right here at the C-Suite Network. And this has been Jeffrey Hayzlett with All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett right here on C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. Hey, at the end of every show, I like to talk about what I learned, and today is no different. I tell you, what I learned was I was scared when I watched this movie, because everyone will be moved by the imagery and the potential of what it means for you, your family, your business, and certainly our country. But like most things in the C-suite, what I learned is there's a solution, and the solution is to take action. And today, that's what we all have to do. So make sure that you go to the website and take action today on Grid Down Power Up, and make sure this doesn't become a reality, but the real reality is what we make it.
Welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winterbrill. We're here with Stu Heineck. He's the author of How to Get a Meeting with Anyone.
Yep.
Can't wait to get into this. It's great to have you with us.
Can't wait to.
So I don't say this often. There was one other book we did earlier where I said, this is the kind of title you see on a book in an airport gift shop, and it grabs you.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, we've all had that moment. If only I could get. How do I get a meeting with that person? How do I get that person on the phone?
Yeah.
And now you've written a book with your secrets.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you apparently have the answers, and you do, because I've read the book. So I'm excited to get to dive right in. So tell us, how did the idea for this book come about? Personal experience, right?
Well, a long time ago, I was just starting my career, and I knew that I wanted to use cartoons, or wanted to blend cartoons with marketing. And when I was starting, direct mail was kind of a big deal, actually. That's,
right.
And I wanted to work with publishers here in New York, Time Inc. and Condé Nast and so on. And my first break was I got 2 assignments, one for Rolling Stone and one for Bon Appetit.
So we should say you're a cartoonist.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You're an artist. That's
a cartoonist
at the core
and a marketer, though.
Yes.
Both of them.
Right.
I've always been both. So,
okay.
So I created these test campaigns, and they worked. They not only did they work, they beat the controls, which means they set a record for response. That was the most response that they'd ever gotten in those slots for those mailings. So it beat the record. It beat the controls. I thought, hey, perfect. That I've got it now. That gives me the chance to spread it to the rest of the publishing industry.
What did you do?
Well, what that meant, I needed to reach about 24 VPs and directors of circulation or consumer marketing. And these VPs at Time Inc. and Condé Nast and Time Warner and so on, you're not going to get through to them very easily. And I knew that, but I also knew that, I knew they'd want to hear about these two new controls, and also how I did it. And so I made up this little campaign. I didn't know what to call it, so I called it a contact campaign. I had to talk about it, so it's a contact campaign. And what it was just 8x10 prints of a cartoon, each about each recipient, so they were personalized. And went with a note that said, this is a device I just used to beat the controls for Rolling Stone and Bon Appetit magazines.
What do you mean by beat the controls? What does that mean?
Well, so in statistics, you're always testing against a control group. That's the constant. Right? So in direct marketing, it's the most effective thing you've ever mailed. That becomes the new control group.
I see. Okay.
But it also is sort of jargon for that's the thing we roll out millions of pieces of. And so I sent that note saying I just beat the controls for these 2 magazines. We should put this to the test for your titles. And I broke through to all of them. And again, coming from the direct marketing world, I already knew that 100% response rates are supposed to be impossible.
Yeah.
I got 100% response rate.
Incredible.
And then all of them converted to clients, so it was a 100% conversion rate.
And again, what was the winning token? What did you do exactly? You sent in a cartoon.
I sent them a cartoon, yeah. Sent them a cartoon about them.
A personalized cartoon.
Personalized cartoon. A lot of times, I had a lot of people copy what I do.
Right,
and they don't get the fact that this cartoon isn't just, I'm going to make this thing about you, but it's going to be about my brand or my offer. You really have to, if someone's going to read a cartoon, and by the way, readership surveys have been showing that they're the best read and remember parts of anything they're in editorially. So anything, newspapers or magazines, they get the top marks. So if you're going to send a cartoon, it better be good.
Right.
And people are used to good cartoons, funny cartoons.
Yeah. It's a high bar.
Just a grab for attention. But it's talking about your offer, perhaps, or your brand, which is what clients always try to do with these cartoons. I always have to counsel them out of that. But if it's anything like that, it just kills it. So, but when it's on target, these are like magic.
Yeah.
They're like just magic
gold.
bullets.
Yeah, striking gold.
Yeah.
So you created a term for what you did. You call it contact marketing.
Yeah.
So Stu, in a nutshell then, what is contact marketing?
Well, I just described the campaign, my first campaign, to the publishers, to just 24 people. So one thing is it's micro-focused. You're not going to a mass audience. You're going to a very, very tightly targeted audience. Usually you're using something that maybe a little audacious. A lot of times that's a theme. It's not always that, but it tends to be a lot of audacious things because you want to get someone's attention.
Right.
That means you're also including a lot of production value and actual monetary value in what you're doing. But that's okay because again, you're just going to a very small audience. So if you spent $100 per person, but you were making millions on the back end, well, it's worth it.
Sure.
Right. So and that would end up pulling a huge ROI. So they're micro-focused, and you can expect high response rates once it's dialed in, and high response rates as high as 100%.
Right.
And ROI, the record so far of all the stories I know of is 3.5 million %.
Wow.
I don't even know how to understand that
I don't
number.
even, yeah, who's counting?
That's right.
So just a step back for a moment. So this idea
Yeah.
of contact marketing, at the end of the day, we're trying to reach someone that you can't just send an email anymore. You're saying there's that special sauce, and through the form of contact marketing, you're a cartoonist. You were given a gift, and you could send these personalized cartoonists to these CEOs or magazine editors who you were trying to reach, and that's how you did it. They saw this cartoon and they contacted you. So let's kind of give the audience some examples of contact marketing, because I'm not a cartoonist, so I'm thinking, wow, that's great. I wish I were a cartoonist. I could probably reach more people if I could draw the way you can. So in the book, you talk about some ways that will cost you, but then some free ones, right? Because some people don't have a lot of money when they're starting off, and they're saying, can I contact market for free?
You can, yeah,
Okay.
that's right. And you just mentioned email, that you shouldn't use email. You can use email.
Sure, yeah.
It's overused as a crowded channel.
I'm saying if it hasn't worked for you yet.
But I certainly would say if you're going to do it, timing would be important, and brevity would be very important. Really get to the point.
Sure.
Don't waste this person's time.
Right.
And a lot of times you'll see copy that's like this long on the page, and you say, well, I'm not going to read that. Nobody will read that.
I know, and it's a shame because that person obviously spent a lot of time formulating.
Yeah, they did. They spent too much time.
Too much time,
actually.
Yeah.
But so you can do that. You can use, obviously, a lot of people are using LinkedIn. That's free. I mean, you have to have a computer connection. You have to have a computer. I suppose that's not free, but it's free. But then there are all kinds of approaches to contact marketing. Some favorites, there are all kinds of gifts. There are other gifts that really wow people and have them saying, wow, I get it. I get what your offer is. I mean, I get what your value is. I get what your brand is. I get it immediately. I didn't even realize I get it. I just get it. In fact, what they're really experiencing is, I love the way this person thinks.
Right.
I got to meet them. So there are really interesting forms of gift giving. You can go in a different direction and offer value in terms of research.
I would think, Stu, that nowadays, in the digital world we live in, most people are making their inquiries via email or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So are many people using snail mail anymore? Probably not.
Yeah, that's right. And great point, because if they're not using it, I don't use crowded channels. That's really kind of an important point.
Right.
If everybody's using email and LinkedIn, you might want to try something else.
Right.
And if you send something through the mail or via FedEx, something like that, then you will stand out.
Right.
Yeah.
The question is, though, obviously, the world we live in today, are members of the C-suite opening packages? Are they apt to open things? I guess their executive assistant might be the gatekeeper, but are people opening unsolicited packages?
Yeah, they still are.
Okay, so don't fear that.
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing, and a lot of people fear executive assistants. You shouldn't. You should be including them in your campaign.
Okay.
They are a vital part of your campaign, and not because you should sweet talk them and, I don't know, manipulate them somehow. They are decision makers as well, and they're really important. In the book, I call them talent scouts or vice presidents of contact. They're just really important. In fact, a lot of times CEOs will ask, well, how was this person on the phone with you? Were they, did they treat you well?
Sure.
That's
the first level of screening.
Yeah, they're really important. So if you include them in the campaign, then I think if you're sending something, then you should be talking to them first.
Sure.
And not to get their permission so much, but just to say, I'm sending this thing. In fact, I should show you what we send.
Yeah.
Because we end up calling ahead. So this is a big board. What we call a big board.
Right.
And you can see there's it's a big board.
Wow.
And there's a cartoon in there, and the cartoon is it's personalized.
Amazing.
To the recipient.
Are they usually this big?
They are, yeah.
Wow. Do you want to read it?
Jeffrey Hayzlett says you can tell a lot about a person just by looking at their book deal. I tend to agree. So if I was sending that to Jeffrey, I would get through.
Right.
Jeffrey would say, "Oh my God, this is great." Take a selfie with it.
This is great. It's different. It's unique. Yeah. And it's you.
So we were talking about executive assistants, though, and so we'll tell them, the rep will tell them, or I'll tell them if I'm using it. hey, I've got a print. One of the Wall Street Journal cartoonists, I'm sending a print of one of my cartoons. And so I just wanted to, I wanted to be a surprise for your boss, but not for you.
Give him a heads up, a warning, because it doesn't come out of nowhere.
Because you mentioned unsolicited packages. You don't really, it's a good thing to do.
But in the world of anthrax and everything.
Let them know about it,
Exactly. How long have you been a cartoonist for the Wall Street Journal?
God, 5 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Let's get to some of the examples of what, some more well-known examples of this contact marketing. You say someone took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal. That's an idea,
God, yeah.
right? So tell us about a couple of them. There's a pigeon here I have written down.
I was going to say, I didn't kind of get to the last category earlier. There's also sort of over-the-top stuff. So those two things are examples of that. So the Wall Street Journal thing was really a great thing, done by a very, very clever guy, Rick Bennett. Rick owned a small advertising agency in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he had a tech client who came to him one day and said, I'd like to sell my business to Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle. I know he'd be interested in it, but I don't know how to get a hold of him. I don't know how to get in front of him. And Rick said, I know exactly what we'll do. Rick's that way. He's pretty cool. So Rick said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create this contact letter, and I'm going to create it and lay it out as a full-page ad, and we'll run it in the Wall Street Journal. Wow. Think about that. And this was a few years ago. It cost him $10,000 just to run the ad.
You have to have the money to do that.
You do, yeah. And it's a big gamble. Think about that. $10,000 just to reach one person.
Right, but I clearly had the money to gamble.
You did, you did. And I would say that audacity is a theme that shows up in a lot of these things. So certainly there was a lot of audacity on display there.
Quite bold.
Now, and what's really cool about this is that, Larry probably reads the Journal. So I'm sure that he probably saw it. That's not what lit this thing up. What is that all of the people who had ready access to Larry, and I don't know who they are, but there aren't a lot of them. Whoever it is, the people he knows, maybe his family members, they read the Journal. And friends and family,
Right.
But they read the Journal, and they were calling him all day long. So think about what this did. It recruited the help of all the people that Larry knows to call him all day long to say, did you see this thing?
So the system works,
So it did? Yeah, it did.
Yeah, so that's an expensive example of contact marketing. But can you give us one or two that are free, for someone who doesn't have a lot of money but needs to reach someone?
So let's talk about email for one.
Okay.
Aaron Ross, who wrote Predictable Revenue, one of the people that I interviewed for the book, told me a story of how he once wrote an email to Mark Benioff. He just figured out what his email address is. That's kind of easy to do.
Yeah.
And he wrote just I think it was under a dozen words, and said, Mark, we do this. Would that be of interest? And he got an answer back in 30 seconds. Okay. Now, otherwise, you won't get through to Mark Benioff. And in fact, if you write probably any more than that, you won't get through to him.
What did he title the email, though? Do you know that?
I don't remember that. And I thought that's really interesting. I've got to see if I can get through to Mark. And I did. Same thing.
So
got back to me right away.
Wow.
Yeah. So keep it really, really, really brief.
Okay.
And you mentioned the number 12. If you can do it in 12 words or less, great. And do it in a way that has them asking, well, how would you do that? Whatever it is that you're saying you can do or you'd like to do.
Leave them wanting more. Tease them.
You just think of what would they, but don't manipulate them. Just be very straightforward. But I'd like to do this and it'll have this effect. Maybe something like that.
Pique their interest.
So they're saying, how would you do that?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Interesting.
The other.
Excuse me 1 second. Does that 12 words include the dear Mike? Or do you say eliminate that? Is that a waste of time? Okay, 14. I'm sure people are wondering
actually,
now.
Don't say dear, because you don't know them. Just Mark.
Mark,
Dash.
Okay. So not even a hi Mark. Okay, just Mark.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other one is timing. So, CEOs, if you think about it, CEOs are very busy during the week, and their assistants are very busy going through their emails, and they're filtering them and so on. So that's not really a very good time to send an email to a CEO. But if you send it, it's a really great tip. I think this came from Mark Hunter. And Mark said, if you send an email, let's say early Saturday morning, or Sunday evening.
Off-peak.
Yeah, off-peak, but also at a time when there's no filter, there's no executive assistant, but they're also, their inbox just isn't very full.
Right.
And so Saturday morning, they're getting up, they might be checking their email before they get started on the weekend. And so you can reach them actually then.
So it's interesting. I thought the opposite. I always think you don't really know if they're reading the email. Maybe they're one of those people who's not reading their work email on the weekend, so then what ultimately happens is that email will then get caught in the abyss of the Monday morning
You would think so.
bunch.
You would think so.
I never, I've always wondered that in my head. Like,
Yeah.
it depends on the person. No, but you think most people are checking their email on the weekend?
I think they are. And I've reached Steve Forbes that way.
Wow.
You'd be surprised.
Okay, it's worth a shot.
Who responds? Yeah.
Yeah. So Stuart, all that said, at the end of the day, what is the goal of contact marketing?
Well, you might think it's just to get through to someone or to get their attention, and I guess you could get their attention if you shot a flare. You could get attention in a lot of ways. Not all of it is positive,
Right.
but yes, it's to get their attention. But it's also, God, use audacity, use creativity. Really just enthrall them. But ultimately, what you want them to be doing is saying, "I love the way this person thinks. I've got to meet them." And if you do that, then think about what that first meeting will be like. It's
Right.
going to be great. It won't be a cold call at all.
Yeah, you've given them a small taste of your mindset and how
Yeah.
you think, and they want to hear more,
Yeah,
see more.
makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're out of time. I have one last question because I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, how does social media impact this idea of contact marketing?
Oh God, yeah. Social media is a big factor in getting in contact with people. But think about LinkedIn. There's 500 million people there now, and it keeps rising. But and it's a great way to meet people. I'm constantly meeting people, and people are constantly reaching out to me that they've read the book, and they're telling me great stories of what's happened as a result of reading the book. I love that.
Right. So that's a way to contact market you.
It is absolutely. If you read the book, yeah.
Right, but I'm saying, as opposed to just writing a traditional, banal email, is there something you suggest to grab someone's attention using social media? Is it sending a GIF? Is it a meme?
I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
I would send them. What I would do is I would do a little bit of research first, find out what's important to them, and how you fit into that.
Okay.
I think that's just sort of social media 101 at this point. And then think about what it is, what sort of value you can bring to them. Then reach out to them. You might start out saying, "I saw you speak at the C-Suite Network event yesterday," or something like that. I would imagine that'll get you through to a lot of the people who spoke.
Right.
And when you said this, I was wondering what you really meant. Did you mean this or this?
Okay.
That'll create engagement.
Okay.
The wrong way to do it is you reach out, and as an author, I will often respond. I'll basically, connect with almost anyone. And because I don't know who's read the book, and I want to connect with the people who've read the book. So every once in a while, someone will reach out, and I'll respond back, and then they'll hit me with a pitch. Not the way to do it.
Okay.
And also it's a long pitch.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right. It's
you
like
gotta
they're
be
kind
kidding
of
me.
tricking you, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just boneheaded.
Right.
Don't do it that way.
Well, there's so many great, tips, techniques, tools in the book. You have to read the book because you talk about some of the tactics in contact marketing, or contact marketing that involves sending swords, egg cartons, newspaper ads. We've talked about
Pigeons.
Yeah, it goes on and on and on, and also understanding CEOs, if that's who you're trying to reach. So there's some great stories in here. But again, monetary contact marketing and contact marketing that's free because you're covering sort of all spectrums. Also, before we go, I just want to say there's a quote on the back of the book from Rick Dees, who we know is a legendary radio personality, and he says that your ability to make contact through unique methods is phenomenal. He's a creative genius, and I think that hits the nail on the head because clearly you're giving a gift with your cartoons, but now you've shared your secrets with us for people without artistic
Everybody
ability.
has it. So it's all out there.
Everyone has their own ability. It might not be cartoonist ability, but thank you for sharing because it's a really interesting read and applicable to anyone.
It is. Anyone can use it, and really, you think about it. It really doesn't have to apply just to selling.
Thank you so much. It was very insightful, very unique.
Thanks for having me on.
And if you'd like more information on the book, just head to our website, c-suitebookclub.com, c-suitebookclub.com. I'm Taryn Winter-Brill. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV.
Welcome to C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg. Robert Martinez is the founder and CEO of Rockstar Capital, and he's here to explain how you too can capitalize on the booming real estate market. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's great to have you here. And why do you prefer investing in real estate as opposed to the stock market or traditional 401k programs?
Because real estate is real and it's stable. You know, how many times have you gone to bed at night and you looked at your portfolio and you're thinking, man, I'm doing great on my mutual funds. You wake up in the morning and some event happened and now you're down 15%. That's happened again and again. And you know what? I don't have the stomach for that. But in multifamily real estate, it's about heads and beds. And it's about customer service and focusing on the renewal. So when I go to bed at night, my occupancy is the same thing when I wake up in the morning. And that occupancy determines my cash flow.
And why do you prefer multifamily real estate to single family or commercial real estate?
Look, I think everybody should get started somewhere, especially if you're low on cash. And single family is a fantastic opportunity because you can, with $20,000, $30,000 here in Texas, you can buy you a rent house, you can learn the game, you can invest in it, create equity and turn and flip it. But in multifamily, we have what's called the magic formula, forced appreciation, where a $10 rent bump on a 200 unit property can create $400,000 of valuation. Now imagine if you can save $10 of expenses because you rework a contract on 200 units. That's another $400,000 of valuation. So I think you get the point. That's $800,000 of valuation that you could not have done in a single family investment.
And what are the indicators in where to invest in real estate? Is it really location, location, location?
Well, location must be surrounded by something important. And here at Rockstar Capital, we like to focus all of our portfolio near schools. Schools are what drive families. And here in Texas, specifically in Houston, we have some of the best schools in the state. So the majority of our portfolio is near these school districts, these top-ranked school districts, because we want people to keep renewing. The name of the game is renewal. Every time that you renew, you add $50,000 of valuation. Every time somebody moves out, you lose $50,000 of valuation. So it's very important to eliminate all the issues and make sure that people want to renew.
All right, so how have you leveraged local relationships to find better real estate deals?
Real estate is a people game. It's about shaking hands and kissing babies. We were at a conference in Florida right before COVID came in, and I made two key contacts. One of those contacts led me to somebody who made an offer on a property that we have that's going to turn into my biggest single score. And the other relationship we made there allowed us to buy a property from somebody else, which turned into the largest acquisition we've ever done here at Rockstar Capital. So it is a people game.
All right, and then finally, what advice would you give to someone starting out in real estate investing?
Look, the best time to invest in real estate was yesterday, and the next best time is today. Make sure you start doing your research now, but this is a networking game. You've got to shake hands and kiss babies. So if you're not that type, if that's not in your personality, get you a partner. Get you somebody who's not afraid to walk into the crowd and say, hi, my name is Robert, and start creating those relationships, because relationships turn into contracts and contracts turn into money.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Robert, for coming on and talking about it. And thank you for watching C-Suite TV Insights. I'm Greg Greenberg.